And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the always active world of Indiana basketball. This is our 127th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 519th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, June 20th, 2019. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Martin takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
Okay, well, obviously, Romeo Langford being in the green room and getting drafted is a big moment for the IU program. Literally, the pick just came through moments ago before we went live. Romeo goes number 14 to the Boston Celtics. That is huge, and we are going to talk about that a lot on this episode of the Assembly Call. You don't hang banners without NBA talent, and it's obviously much easier to attract NBA talent when you can point to recent high-profile examples of players from your school fulfilling their NBA dreams, which Romeo is this evening. So Romeo's big moment is a banner moment in its own right. One, as I said, that we're going to discuss more on this week's show. Ben Ladner will be here to break down how Romeo fits with the Boston Celtics here shortly. But it's not my choice for the banner moment for this week because as important as Romeo getting drafted is, it's more of a reflection of Indiana's recent past than its present or future. So rather, I'm going with something that happened on Monday, something that suggests things are progressing in a positive direction with respect to one of Indiana's top targets in the class of 2020. And that something was Brian Snow of 24/7 Sports submitting a crystal ball pick in Indiana's favor for in-state guard Trey Galloway. It was quickly followed by a similar pick from Mike Pegram of Peegs. Now, I'm not normally one who puts much stock in crystal balls, so why trust these two picks? Because unlike a lot of crystal ball pickers who seem to just kind of be throwing darts, Brian and Mike have a combined crystal ball accuracy percentage of 93% through 152 picks. In other words, they are more accurate with their picks than Steph Curry is from the free throw line. And importantly, their recent picks match what I've heard from some other sources. And, you know, it seemed like a good sign when Trey and his dad attended last week's team camp in Bloomington, even though Trey wasn't playing. Granted, none of this means anything concrete, but it does have me feeling optimistic that Trey could be the first domino to fall in the class of 2020. And while he isn't a guy who projects as an NBA player, at least right now, he does project as the kind of player and person that the best IU teams always seem to have. A guy with the build of Will Sheehy, the defensive instincts and coach's kid smarts of a Dane Fife, the competitiveness and craftiness of Tom Coverdale, and the fearlessness attacking the basket of Al Durham. If his outside shot comes around, and remember, he shot a very good percentage as a sophomore in high school before suffering a lingering wrist injury, he can become a multi-dimensional two-way threat as an upperclassman. Trey's recruiting ranking won't knock your socks off, but so what? He's exactly the kind of four-year in-state player who can help Archie Miller build the consistent winner we all crave. So, let's hope that the recent chatter about Trey Galloway proves prophetic. He may never be a green room guy, but he definitely has what it takes to be an important piece of Indiana's next national championship contending team, and hopefully he'll bring some friends along with him. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is the Adrian Wojnarowski of Girls U Sports Coaching in Cincinnati, the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and one of the world's most renowned bracketologists. And while he's known for his mild-mannered demeanor, he's been known to lose his cool at times, just like the rest of us.
Oh, crap. Don't stop doing that. Hey, you shut up. Yes, in addition to being comfortable, the sweatshirt is a great thing that you can use to cover your mouth and scream obscenities into while you're watching a game like this. It's time to shut the down, folks.
Andy, what is your bottoms line from the last week in Indiana basketball?
Well, we'll certainly talk more about Romeo as we get started. I appreciate both he and the Celtics timing for that happening right before we went live. So I think like a lot of other IU fans, my attention at this point turns to Juwan Morgan, who we don't have a whole lot of reason, if any reason, to really believe he'll be drafted. But he's a guy that has proven really easy to root for over his 4 years at IU, whether it be playing through injuries and eventually becoming such a focal point of what this team was. And, you know, there are a lot of measurables and all those kinds of things that maybe suggest that he's going to struggle to really, carve out a role for himself in the NBA. He's a guy that I struggle to bet against at the same time, and really look forward to hopefully him landing in a good situation from a summer league perspective, and hopefully earning his way onto a roster likely not this year, but maybe at some point. And like I said, like a lot of IU fans, I think he's a guy that everybody's going to root for. And a more unheralded, I guess, storyline from a draft perspective than Romeo for sure. But a guy that I think if there are characteristics you look for of people who might be able to, outplay their, their draft ranking or whatever you want to say, I think he's got the right attitude and a good skill set to be able to do it. And whatever he does, I'm sure IU fans will be cheering him on along the way. So that's kind of where my focus turns now that the Romeo news is out there. And like I said, we'll talk about that more, but now it's not necessarily what will happen for Juwan during the draft tonight, but kind of what happens after that for him, and certainly wish him all the best.
Absolutely. All right. And to my right, no, it is not Ryan Phillips. Ryan is out once again, as apparently his full-time employer, the Big Lead, has deemed covering the NBA draft more worthy of his time than kibitzing with us about a college basketball team 3 months before its season starts.
I think we should all respect him for that.
He ought to be fired.
I think I'm with Coach on this one. And yes, that does mean that Coach is back, fresh off seeing his son get married and celebrating his own wedding anniversary. Coach, congratulations from all of us here, and I'm sure from the chat mob as well. Welcome back. It is Tonsoni time. What's on your mind?
It's good to be back. Celebrations are great. Weddings, anniversaries, nothing better than celebrating winning basketball, though. And that's what Indiana basketball is about. Congratulations to Romeo Langford. I'm sure his family and fans are celebrating his selection in the NBA. And I'm just excited about keep talking about the next recruit, the schedule coming out, all of those to get back to celebrating Big Ten championships, Final Fours, and maybe having one more time down in the fountain for another a banner. We just need that, and it's time. And I don't know that this year is going to be that time, but it keeps. I just thought back to being on that dance floor at the wedding, to Seven Nations Army, and having a little bit of a mosh pit kind of brought me back to trying to work my way to the fountain in 1987. And I had a little flashback. And so I got rejuvenated for this off season and the building of the program. So a lot to celebrate in Indiana basketball, a lot in the future to celebrate. And, it's a great program to follow, and let's keep talking.
All right, well, here's what we're going to talk about this week. No surprise, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Romeo now that the pick is in. We will talk about him going to the Boston Celtics, get Ben Ladner's analysis of the fit, our thoughts as well. And then in our second segment, we're going to discuss the top 10 moments from Romeo's freshman season. And I had so much fun putting this together earlier today. And, Coach, as I was telling you before we went live, man, I had forgotten how many great moments he had. I think this is going to be a really fun and an instructive trip down memory lane for fans who maybe forgot just all the great winning plays that Romeo made this season. And then after that, with whatever time we have left, as we always do, we will answer your questions. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. Before we get to all that, a quick word from this week's sponsor, which is SeatGeek. Do you ever feel like ticketing websites make getting to the event difficult on purpose? It's as if they're so big they feel like they can get away with not caring about the customer experience. But not SeatGeek. SeatGeek cares desperately about the satisfaction of their customers, which is why a quick glance at the App Store shows over 50,000 five-star reviews. Why? Because SeatGeek delivers a better process for buying tickets. SeatGeek pulls together millions of tickets from all over the web, and then they rate each deal on a scale of 1 to 10. And the user interface communicates it all clearly by displaying tickets on an interactive seat map so you can see right where they are, and by using a color-coded system for value. Green dots mean good deals, red dots are overpriced, and every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets with confidence. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone. It's by far the fastest and easiest way to find tickets. When my wife and I want to find concert tickets, it's the first place we look. When Boston comes to Dallas next year, you can bet I'll be busting out SeatGeek to look for tickets to go to that game. And best of all, SeatGeek will even give you $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase.
Can a brother get some coupons?
All you need to do is use our promo code. Download the SeatGeek app today. Use the promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first purchase. Okay, gentlemen, so let's talk about Romeo Langford going to Boston. We're going to bring Ben Ladner on here in just a second, but Coach, your gut reaction to, in addition to the fact that obviously now, we'll have an IU guy that actually gets mentioned on a Bill Simmons podcast since he talks about Boston so much. It's an interesting fit, and we'll get Ben's thoughts on this in a minute, where, Boston is a team that Are they going to be going through a rebuilding phase? Are they going to reload with some more high-priced guys? They're really kind of a franchise in flux, but a stable one with good leadership that has shown the ability to develop young players. So, my initial reaction, take it for what it's worth, is I think this is a good spot for him. I'm encouraged about this because I think it's a good franchise, but he might also have a chance to actually play early on. And I think those two things bode well for him.
Yeah, I think Romeo's going to have a chip on his shoulder. I think some of the detractions, some of the negatives that have been out have been a little bit unfair. The young man played through injury. Yes, every player has strengths and weaknesses, but going to Boston and Brad Stevens is a great place. He's going to get coached well. He's going to be in a system, and hopefully, they can, depending on the roster movement, still be a competitive team in the East. So, falling to 14 is not really horrible for a young man coming out of college.
He's a lottery pick.
But he's a lottery pick, and he's not going to a lottery team. Again, there's some adjustments that need to be made at Boston, but I think this is going to be good. I think Brad Stevens tries to get the best out of his players and put them in positions where they can succeed, and I think he's got a lot to work with Romeo Langford. And I just think he's going to be hungry to prove people that he is a lot better than what people think.
Andy, your initial gut reaction to Romeo going to Boston?
Yeah, I think it's so much of these guys, where they go, it's all about fit and being able to get put into a good environment. And it's one of the things where, from a monetary perspective, it's not good to fall further into the lottery or, where he did compared to maybe where he would have been had he been able to come out last year. But the flip side of that is you go to, while it is a roster that's got a lot of questions about who's actually going to be there, there's at least a couple solid guys in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum that give a good nucleus. I think a good coaching situation who's going to be able to try to put guys into a good position to succeed and maximize their skills. That to me is a good thing for him. People talked about him going to the Pacers. I forget who, I don't know if it was when you and Alex talked to Scott Agnes or if it was somebody else that just was like, or maybe it was Galen on Crimson Cast, but it was like, while that would have been kind of a cool story, like he needs to get away from Indiana and be able to kind of have some space and make his own name someplace else. So I think in that regard, a little bit less of a pressure situation for him. And depending on what Boston does with the other picks that they have left, could be what turns out to be a really young team, but could be on the upswing if they really draft well and do some things there. So I think overall a relatively good scenario for him. Again, with free agency being what it is, it's a little bit hard to say how he exactly fits on the roster. But I think what everybody's seen from Brad Stevens is that he's going to do his best to maximize what Romeo's talents are and develop him over the course of time.
Also, as we know with the NBA, don't get too attached to a player with a certain team because there are lots of trades that happen. So, that's one thing to keep in mind. All right, our resident NBA expert Ben Ladner is here, hopped on live to react to this. Ben, thanks for being available. I know you have a lot of stuff going on today. Your initial reaction to Romeo going to the Celtics?
Yeah, well, Coach mentioned him kind of falling to 14. Frankly, I was a little surprised he was drafted as high as 14. I think from everything that you heard coming into the draft and just the mock drafts and the boards and projections, he was one of the guys I think that really fell from the start of the college basketball season to right now. And I that's obvious. It goes without saying, but given the other guys who were still on the board when he was selected, I was a little surprised that he went in the lottery. But, I think I said a couple weeks ago on this show that this is the kind of draft where, for me, I don't really see a lot of like bankable all-stars guys you look at and you say, okay, we can build around this guy, or we feel like this guy's going to be, an all-star, all-NBA level guy for the next, 10 years or so. It's more of kind of a role player draft. And if not that, then sort of an uncertain draft where there's guys that you look at and you're saying, okay, maybe they could be a solid NBA player, but we just have no idea. And so being a little bit more of a weaker draft, a little bit more of a thinner draft, more top heavy, I actually do like the idea of kind of taking a swing, making an upside play a little earlier in the draft than most teams might. And I think it's in some ways a really smart play for the Celtics to say, okay, we look at this guy, we know what his flaws are. We recognize that he needs to kind of get some more things under his belt, kind of develop the rest of his game before he becomes the type of player we want him to be. but we see kind of the makings of that solid starter, maybe even solid rotation player. But we see that kind of player in Romeo Langford. It's just a matter of whether we can get that player out of him. And so given the other options on the board, I don't think this is, a crazy pick to take him this high. And I think, kind of taking that upside play where you say, okay, if he can figure out the jump shot, if he can engage a little bit more on defense, if he can fill out his body, things like that, then he could be maybe an all-star level player. And taking a swing on a guy like that as opposed to maybe playing it safe, I don't think either is a bad option. I don't think either is necessarily a great option, but this is an option. It's a viable option. And I think Boston, like both the other guys mentioned, is going to be a good situation for him. Again, provided he stays in Boston and doesn't get traded. It's going to be a good situation for him being able to play on the wing, come off the bench behind Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, two other young guys who have kind of quickly progressed and made their way in the league, playing for Brad Stevens, one of the best basketball coaches in the world. That system has, save for this past season, has kind of a history of stability and being able to get the most out of players who, like Romeo, maybe are a little flawed. So I think that's a good place for him to kind of start his career, build on what the skills he has now, and maybe flesh out the ones that he doesn't.
So, we obviously know about some of the things that Romeo needs to improve on. Does he project as a guy who on a good team can be a rotation player from day one? Because what I think is interesting about Boston is we don't know what they're going to be next year. I mean, they've been working, they were working toward getting Anthony Davis. That didn't happen. They lost Kyrie. I can't imagine they're just going to go into full rebuild mode. I mean, they're still going to try and compete next year, which means that you're going to be a little bit less patient with a young guy than maybe a team who's in full rebuild mode. How does he, again, it's a good situation going to a better team, but there's also more pressure on you to produce from day one. And with the things that he's got to work on, how does he project on a team like that?
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to be an impact guy right away, just because I do think the Celtics are going to be decent to good next year, if not elite and championship level. So I think they'll be a playoff team, and those types of teams, there generally just isn't that much room for a rookie, especially one with limitations like the ones that Romeo has right now. That said, I do think he can carve out maybe a 10 to 12 minute role, kind of a guy who comes off the bench, slashes, gets to the basket, maybe makes some plays. What I think is going to be really good for him is that Brad Stevens kind of makes you play defense in order to get on the court. And so if Romeo doesn't play defense, he's not going to play. And I do think that'll be good for him as a guy who often had trouble engaging on defense, a guy who off the ball is a little bit shaky, even if he can dial in a little bit on the ball. And just kind of learning how to play NBA defense, I think, is going to be a big step in his development. And Boston is a place that makes you learn how to do that. So I think that's going to be good. I don't know really what their player development staff is like in comparison to other ones across the NBA, particularly in the shooting development department. I imagine he'll make some strides, if not, I don't think he'll become like a knockdown shooter in year 2 or 3, but I have to figure he'll make some progress as a shooter, and getting a healthy hand back next year, I think, will help as well. But yeah, I think it'll help him just to not have the pressure of being the savior, the guy, in the way that maybe a Zion Williamson or a Ja Morant might be, even an RJ Barrett in New York, the guy who's going to come in and produce right away, and you have that expectation on you. I think the expectation for Romeo is that he's going to come off the bench. He may not play in a lot of games. He may play 20 minutes in some, 5 in others. And it's just going to be that kind of role where it's just whatever's asked of him, that's what he's going to try to provide. I think that's going to be healthiest for him early on. And then we'll see how he projects in that core moving forward. But I do think that's a solid landing spot for him to start things out.
So I was trying to read up as we got on here before the show about the Celtics and kind of free agency and the moving target that all that is. So for those like me who either have researched this for 5 minutes or haven't researched this at all, I guess maybe talk a little bit about what decisions the Celtics have to make in the offseason and how those might impact Langford's role with the team based on kind of how all those things might shake out.
Yeah, well, so it seems like some of the decisions have kind of been made for them already. Obviously free agency hasn't started, so there's still a chance that Kyrie Irving or Al Horford might come back. But it from the reporting that I've seen, mostly it looks like those guys are probably going to be gone. They might try to make some trades to maybe, like an Aaron Baines, get him off the books, get him somewhere else and kind of build with maybe a little bit of a younger core. But that said, I do think they'll be in a decent position next season. And so for them, I look at them, every team could use shooting. I think they the biggest thing is just to kind of retain the guys that they can. And part of that is already done for them. They signed Marcus Smart to an extension last offseason. They've got Jaylen Brown for one more year under his rookie deal, Jason Tatum for 2 more years until he extends. The big one for them is going to be Terry Rozier. I'm personally not of the mind that he should, garner a huge contract this offseason. We'll see what the Celtics think. I'm not totally sure. I do think they're going to need to add a little bit more playmaking because they're losing their 2 best playmakers. Really, the only 2 guys that could kind of, sort of stable the offense when it needed stabilizing. I think Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are not quite there yet. So as far as Romeo's role, I could see them adding some help on the wing and some help at point guard too, because they can use Marcus Smart in kind of either one of those spots. But I do think they'll want to fill out and get maybe a starting level guy at either point guard or shooting guard, just kind of a guy who can space the floor, handle the ball, make some plays a little bit. But again, I don't think it really affects Romeo's role that much. I think the only thing that might really change, his outlook in year one is if Boston doesn't sign anybody, and if they're kind of just, if the cupboard's just kind of bare in terms of talent, and they need him to step into a bigger role. Either way, I think he's coming off the bench. I don't see him usurping Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, or Jason Tatum in the starting lineup. But the only way I really see his role drastically changing is if suddenly he's called upon to play a ton of minutes as a rookie. And I think that could be good for his game, but at the same time, maybe that's not so great for the Celtics if you're asking, a rookie with sort of this flawed skill set to step in and be that major piece, 7th, 8th man off the bench from day one.
It was nice to see Archie Miller was there in the green room with Archie, and I just saw a picture online. Romeo opened up his jacket, and he had candy stripes on the lining of his jacket. Romeo, one of the best dressed guys at the draft, I thought. Very nice suit. Ben, thank you for your insight. Are you going to be writing about – where are you going to be writing about the draft so people can keep tabs on your work?
We'll see. I might be at the step back tonight, just doing some kind of quick hitter stuff. I don't know that I'll necessarily write anything about it. It's just kind of, on a see what the editors need and maybe deliver for them. So that's about it. But yeah, I enjoyed coming on here. Thanks for having me, as always.
Just biding your time until the Ringer finally uncovers you and realizes you're one of the best out there.
Hopefully. We'll see.
Thanks, Ben. Really appreciate you hopping on and talking Romeo with us.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All righty, coming up on the Assembly Call, we are going to count down the top 10 moments from Romeo Langford's one season in Bloomington. There were some big ones, maybe more than you remember, especially in Indiana's most notable wins of the season. This is going to be a fun segment. Stick with us and enjoy this trip down memory lane. All right. Hello to everybody watching live. Congratulations, Romeo. Man, I'm excited for him. That is awesome. That 14 feels about right, I think. As we were talking about, I mean, I understand why he didn't get picked in the first maybe 5 or 10, but I thought starting to see him down in the 20s was just, I mean, especially after going back through and watching all the big plays he made this year. Man, the guy's a gamer. He's a really good player. He's a smart, instinctive basketball player. And yeah, he's got to shoot better, but he was also injured. And some of the shots he did make were huge. Like, he showed that he can make big shots. So I'm excited for him, man. I'm very excited for him.
Yeah,
as I know all of you are too.
Yeah, I mean, I think time will tell with the shot. I think that's what made his range that you saw so wide, because nobody really knew how teams would, how much I guess credit is, I guess the opposite of credit people would give the injury for the way he shot the ball. So, but Jaylen Brown's certainly a guy that was the knock on him coming out. And I think Sam Senior, somebody kind of wrote up, the Celtics have not necessarily been shy or turned off by guys who have questions about their shooting. So, I think hopefully he stays healthy and can figure out what kind of shooter he actually is. Because I don't think IU fans really got a great look at that, and I'm not sure that high school numbers in every case do that justice either way. So, but yeah, like I said, I think a good situation, not a ton of pressure, and a good development atmosphere from a coaching standpoint. So I think those are all things that if he's gonna work out, he's in a good situation for it to be positive. And
it's nice to have IU guys on high profile teams too, because that means you get to see them in nationally televised games, and their teams get talked about more. That's like when Victor was on Orlando and you got Cody out in Charlotte. like sometimes you just don't get to hear as much about those guys, like when you're just consuming general NBA content. Having Romeo in Boston is going to be nice. I think it'll be a little bit easier it's always easy to follow guys on the internet now, but it'll be even easier just because it's a high-profile team. And hopefully he'll be, playing in the playoffs, playing in big games. So I'm excited. And that jacket is awesome. Did you see pictures of the candy stripe jacket?
Yeah.
I mean, I hope he starts selling that on his Twitter account tonight because that jacket's great.
That aspect that's coming out postseason from, what people are saying about him that were in-house, and then, how he's making his T-shirts and that's his IU uniform. It just wasn't a generic uniform. Yep. The candy stripes inside, that's subtle. That's subtle that, I think
he's a Hoosier.
He's a Hoosier, and what happens is he's a quiet demeanor guy, and we all mistake that for maybe a lack of motor or a lack of appreciation for being at IU, and that's something that it's difficult when you're far away and you're watching on TV and you just watch him during games and you see that he's not an emotional person, and then you just jump to those conclusions. The people around him know who it's best, and then you start seeing that he really did love coming to Indiana, and then maybe that can have some reciprocal effect of getting more Indiana guys, the Landers, the first maybe, to see, what, this guy went there, things didn't work out the greatest, but he still loves that place. And that could only be a help.
And I tell you what else is a help, and maybe this shouldn't matter, but I think it does. And we got a question about this. So, we'll maybe get to this a little bit later too, but I think Archie being in the green room is a good thing. Because Alex, we were talking about that after the podcast recording, and none of us were sure if Archie was going to be there. But that's a good thing to be there. That's a good visual, and the fact that Archie can say Romeo was a lottery pick, because I think inevitably, if Romeo had fallen a little bit, fair or unfair, there would have been some negative recruiting about, hey, Romeo was projected as a top 5 guy, and then he didn't even make the lottery. At least now you can say, look, Romeo came to Indiana, he was a lottery pick. How much does that stuff matter? I don't know, but I think it kind of does a little bit for perception. And when you're talking to guys that are, yes, they want to come to Indiana and be invested in Indiana, but they also want to make it to the NBA. I think that stuff matters a little bit. And so I just think maybe you don't gain anything by it, but you don't lose anything. It's like, well, why wasn't the coach there in the green room? Does he not have a good relationship with Romeo? And, why, and Romeo fell. He wasn't even a lottery pick. You kind of just smooth over that stuff. Small, but I think it's got some importance. Anyway.
Yeah, it shouldn't, but it really
I agree.
But
I know, but perception matters.
Yeah, and that negative recruiting aspect that people look for, those things can be just slid in a visit or a conversation from an opponent. And you're right that it kind of takes that away. But that's that stuff that I just drives me nuts about the college game a little bit.
Yep.
He was 5th if he comes supposedly 5th with no one seeing him play college. And so he, quote, fell 9 spots. That's not much. He's a middle of the round. He's a first-round pick. That's
Yep. All right. How do you guys want to do this segment? I don't have clips. I'm nervous about pulling clips since we don't have the rights to them since we're on the radio. I know I've done that in the past, but I didn't want to do that just to be safe. I definitely want to, spend some time reflecting on the last few, but I can kind of run through the first 5 of them pretty quickly. And then do you guys want to react after that, or are there any in particular that you want to react to so that I can kick it to you? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them from 6 to 10, but are there any in particular that you want me to kick it to you for? Do you disagree at all with my list?
No, I think the Michigan State game, I think the order you have them is fantastic. I was going to highlight the Michigan State on the road without Juwan Morgan.
Yep.
To me, makes those two outstanding. And those last 3 all came after the 12-game streak where he could have had his mind focused on something else, and he still produced. So that's the kind of angle that I was going to.
Okay, so we'll definitely hit that angle. Okay, well, I'll go through the 6 through 10 kind of quickly, just chime in if you want to. If you want to jump in, just
there's
jump
a couple
in.
I might jump in on, but yeah.
Okay, so either jump in or wait till I'm done, and then you can jump in. It might help if you jump in actually to break it up, so it's not me talking the whole time. That gets boring for everybody.
Okay.
Including me. No one wants to hear me talk that long without being broken up. Wow, Nasir Little's still on the board. Okay, let's do this. And that first segment was long. It was 22:46. But
yeah, that's
good reason why.
Given what happened in the timing, that was probably unavoidable.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, here we go.
What's going on? It's Christian Wofford. What's the only thing better than an epic buzzer beater? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join my guys Jerod, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU game. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, Christian. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to participate in our unedited live broadcasts or watch those replays, then check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and the coach, Brian Tonsoni. And guys, as I mentioned in the last segment, this episode kind of dedicated to Romeo. It's a big night for Romeo as he gets drafted by the Boston Celtics. And so I wanted to just kind of celebrate his freshman year at Indiana, which, had so many great moments, so many big moments, game-winning moments. And so we're going to count down the top 10 moments from Romeo's freshman season, and I had so much fun putting this together. I really highly recommend, if you haven't gone through and watched some highlight videos of Romeo's freshman season, go do it, because you're probably going to be surprised by just how many big plays there were and some of the ones that you might have forgotten about, and just how breathtaking some of those moments were, the shots that he made, the drives that he had to the basket. So I had a lot of fun putting this together. I think you'll have fun kind of reliving these. We're going to linger a little bit on 1 through 5, but let's kind of go through 6 through 10 here quickly, guys, and if you want to chime in, just do that. For number 10, I had his shooting barrage to end the first half at Penn State. Indiana was down 19-18, and he went off with 4 straight jumpers. He hit 2 really deep three-pointers and 2 really pretty step-back two-pointers that showed so much confidence, and it was a harbinger of things to come when you saw him get in that shooting rhythm, which we would see in later games. And frankly, with some of the mid-range shots, I kind of wish he had taken more of them. I know in today's day and age, it's not a shot that's real popular, but he was really effective at it, and he really showed it during that stretch. Number 9 were the 2 big, huge shots that he made at Arkansas, and these might have even been higher if Indiana had actually ended up winning that game. But this was his first road game. Indiana's down 65-63. He makes a three-pointer with 5 minutes to go. Then it's tied at 69. He makes another three-pointer with Indiana at 3:21 to go. And he also had a really big stretch in the first half when Indiana was dealing with Juwan Morgan's foul trouble in that game. So I just thought for his first road game, that was a really impressive performance.
And that's the start of some of the reduced lineups too, because I think Devontae didn't play in that game, and McRoberts they were very limited. And
Demezi played like 25 minutes that game.
Yeah,
I think.
So to first really big road game, to hit big shots down the stretch was a sign of what he meant to the program.
Yep.
Yeah, that was one that stood out to me as well, just because of not being able to take the big shots down the stretch of that game, hitting some big ones, even though he had shot the ball well from the free throw line, but not really from the field late in that one. And he had 8 rebounds and 5 assists as well. And I think that's a game where, like you said, maybe if the game finishes differently, I think it was so focused on the foul at the end and all those kinds of things that some of the performances and the shots that he made and even that Finney made kind of got lost in the shuffle of that one a little bit just because they didn't win.
Now, this next one might have been the best just individual offensive stretch that he had all season. And that, of course, is when he just went off in the second half against Maryland. Obviously, Indiana loses that game, so it doesn't shine quite as brightly. But Indiana's down 59-50 at the under 8-minute timeout. And Romeo went on to score 16 of the next 20 points. He hit 6 free throws, made a couple of mid-range jumpers, a few three-pointers, and he actually pulled Indiana to within 74-70 with 26 seconds to go in a game that really felt out of reach for a lot of the second half after Maryland made their run. And it was just one of those supernova offensive performances that showed, again, the kind of shooter, the kind of scorer he can be, not just as a driver, but as a shot maker when he got into a rhythm. So that was a really impressive performance. The Louisville game is one that I had kind of forgotten about. And it's kind of a combined moment. This is number 7, where basically he started and finished that game for Indiana. And it wasn't great in between, but Indiana came out in the game, was terrible offensively. They fell down 8-2 early, and he had 6 points and an assist during the first 8 minutes, which just kept Indiana in it. It just kept them alive when they had nothing else to go to, and then the rest of the team kind of caught up. And then during the final 20 seconds of that game, he was 4 for 4 from the free throw line. He had missed a couple free throws earlier, had a bad foul on the three-pointer on Ryan McMahon, but sunk those 4 free throws at the end of the game to seal it. That was a huge win for Indiana. And again, his ability to start that game well, finish it well was big. And then for number 6, before we start going one by one, the Marquette win, he really set the tone. He and Rob Finney and, Al Durham, all those guys really set the tone for that blowout with their great defense. Romeo had 2 steals and an offensive rebound in the first 3 minutes of the game. It was just some of the best defense Indiana played all year. And overall, he had 22 points, 2 blocks, and 3 steals. But I really thought defensively how locked in he was, how active he was at the start of that game set the tone. And I know his defense was criticized, and rightly so at times, but he also had some moments where he showed just how great of a defensive player he can be, that chief among them. Any thoughts on those?
A sign of a good player that you can win games both offensively and defensively. And then 2, the number 7 and number 6 on our list are some of the biggest wins from a bracketology standpoint that kept Indiana alive right down to the end. Those were big must wins in the schedule, the way things happened, and your best players need to step up in your biggest games.
Well, and that's one of the themes here. I mean, Indiana didn't win any big games really without Romeo playing a huge role. He wasn't good in the home game against Michigan State, but did make a couple of plays late. That was just that weird game where Juwan and Romeo didn't really play well, and Indiana was still able to win. But all the other really big wins, I mean, he was huge, if not one of the driving forces behind those wins.
Yeah, I think the Marquette one, if there was one to assume, or I guess I would have assumed that one would have been in your top 5. I think if there's one to kind of push up more, that would be the one for me. 1, because it was such a big win. 2, as you said, he really set the tone. I mean, the start in that game and the way that the crowd got into it was very much a direct result of his aggressiveness on both ends of the floor, and being able to find teammates and really make plays at the beginning of that one. So yeah, if there's one to me that maybe could or should be higher on the list, that would definitely be the one that stands out in my eyes.
Yeah, I thought about it, but then as we go through these, and maybe you would flip 5 and 6. I think 5 might be, the one that you would flip because, everybody played so well in that Marquette game. It was kind of a blowout. It was a little bit harder to pinpoint one maybe game-winning play. Whereas with the rest of these 5, I mean, his contributions, without him, Indiana doesn't really have a chance to win. You talk about that Illinois game, right after the Christmas break, where Indiana really did not play well in the first half. It's tied 32-32, and at that time, Illinois just wasn't a very good team. And they came out in the second half, and the game plan was clearly to get Romeo going in the second half and get him the ball. And, Coach, I think on the halftime report, we talked about it. Like they can't stop Romeo, just give him the ball and let him go. And they did. And he scored Indiana's first 10 points of the second half. The Hoosiers built a 42-34 lead and just kind of nursed that lead for the rest of the game. He ended up with 28, made a ton of free throws. But, again, coming out in the second half, he was the entire focal point, and he took that pressure upon himself and really delivered. And, so again, maybe you say the competition wasn't as great. You flip that with Marquette, but I just thought that stretch where he took over and gave Indiana the lead that they would nurse the rest of the time. That's why I put it over the Marquette game, because no one else was playing well that game.
Yeah,
that was an interesting.
Ahead,
that was an interesting one to look at the box score. I mean, his offensive rating for that game was 136, which is crazy. 7 of 9 on twos, 11 of 15 from the line. So I think a fair performance. And really, that was a game only 6 guys even scored. So he and Juwan were the only ones in double figures and carried a pretty heavy load there. So that was a game that I think kind of got, some of these you look back as like, I don't have great memory of that game. It just kind of got lost in the shuffle. It was right before the wheels started to come off a little bit during that losing streak. But no, a fair point given how well he played, and maybe in contrast to how some other guys played.
And Illinois, that defense turns people over, but it also gives lanes. and Romeo really took advantage of the fact that you could get to the basket, you could cut, you could do some different things against that Illinois defense. That was a huge part of it, and that combined with when we go to number 4, the timing of most of these, if I believe so, is before the losing streak.
Yep.
And so then he's had 7 of the top games. And all of a sudden, then some injuries depleted, and then the team started to change the way they guarded and took away those opportunities. But the Illinois game was one where he had lots of opportunities, and when he did, he took advantage of it.
Number 4 is the Northwestern victory, where he, really had 2 huge plays to close that win out. You'll recall Juwan Morgan missed the end of that game too. He got injured. It was nip and tuck the entire way. Tied at 63 with 39 seconds to go. Romeo got the ball at top of the key, drove in, sunk a floater to give Indiana a 2-point lead, and then went down on the other end, played really good defense, deflected the ball off the Northwestern player. I think it was Vic Law, if I recall correctly. Went out of bounds for a turnover. He was credited with a steal, and Indiana ends up winning that game. I wasn't on the postgame show for that game, Andy. I think you and Ryan handled that one. But that was another one of those just ugly, ugly offensive outings. Juwan's not there, and you're kind of, clearly Archie's looking around at the end. It's like, well, let's give it to Romeo, and he delivered a big bucket and a big defensive play.
I forgot about the defensive play, but that was definitely a game where it was so ugly, and one that at that point, again, you're still feeling pretty good about things. That was coming right on the heels of the Duke loss. But again, at that point, you're 5-2 and feeling okay about things, and you think you're going into it where you've got a couple winnable Big Ten games. So hopes were still high at that point of the season for sure. And it was definitely a Juwan's out. What happens now with very few guys playing well in that game? And he had a big shot down there at the end. So that one, that one made some sense as well. Again, led the team in scoring 20 points and 5 rebounds.
And look, I think the top moments here were pretty obvious what they were going to be. We've got 3 left. I had to go with 2 from the Michigan State game. The first one is Indiana's down 65-64 with 40 seconds to go in regulation. Romeo's at the top of the key. And again, doing this without Juwan Morgan, who left in the first half of that game. He drives against 2 Michigan State defenders. I think it was Goins and Aaron Henry. Puts a layup high off the glass to give Indiana a 66-65 lead. Certainly felt like it could be a game-winning basket. Obviously, that game would end up going to overtime. And then in overtime, great Romeo moment number 2 for me is down 70-68, 3 minutes and 15 seconds to go. Al Durham hustles for an offensive rebound, kicks it out to Romeo Langford. He drains a 3, which gave IU the lead for good. And, we talked a lot about Romeo and his shooting needs to get better, and it does. In terms of volume, Romeo was not a very good shooter this year. But boy, when shots needed to be made, as you mentioned, in the Arkansas game and, trying to come back against Maryland and some of these really big moments, he had a knack for hitting some big ones. And, that's something that, again, if that's a harbinger of things to come, that's one of the things that can help propel him in the NBA and help him outplay even what his draft position was. So, Coach, your thoughts on those 2 plays? I had to pick a couple from that game. It was Indiana's biggest victory. And, Justin Smith was great. Devontae Green was great. Deron Davis was great. All those guys were awesome. Indiana doesn't win that game without the brilliant individual offensive talents of Romeo. And he was 6 of 18 in that game. So he missed a lot of shots, but came up with some really big ones.
The thing that I take away from that, it was on the road in a place where Indiana doesn't play well with your, not maybe your best player, but your second best or equally best player out in the first half. And you step up late and hit shots. And I always say this, shooters have, short memories. If you're 6 for 18, but you're a player, you're going to want the ball in clutch situations. And those 2 situations are number 3 and our number 2. But when I just look back, 5 of these, Jerod, are road games, and that speaks to a level of toughness as well. You have to be a competitor and be tough in order to want the ball, and you're not going to score. You're not going to hit every game winner. You're going to miss some. But boy, what a clutch performance at Michigan State in a game that really gave us some life after a long stretch of bad basketball.
Yeah, and if you're going to win games like that, you have to have great players make big plays. The last time Indiana won at Michigan State, Victor Oladipo just made big play after big play down the stretch. And Romeo wasn't alone. And again, as I said, he missed some shots and other guys made some big plays. But, he really had some of the biggest offensive plays when Indiana really needed points. He was able to come through and get them. Andy, any lingering thoughts on? And again, that Michigan State, when you talk, Coach, about how a lot of these were before the losing streak and then after it, that, of course, remains one of the most unlikely victories that I can ever remember in the midst of a big losing streak. And the one game you win is at Michigan State. That's just going to seem more and more absurd the further away from it we get, I think.
Yeah,
that seemed absurd in the moment.
Implausible. Yeah, it was when Juwan goes down and playing in that environment. I just think that, as Coach said, he was not afraid to take big shots in a difficult environment. And some of these, there were shots where he settled for, long jumpers and when maybe he didn't need to. But at the very
end of regulation, I think, against Michigan State, he did
the drive though in that situation, and then the one that you've got highlighted that we'll hit here though, show his ability to get to the rim and make some tough shots around the basket where angles weren't always great, or you got guys coming over to challenge a shot. So I think these really show, if you want to, if Boston fans tune in and you want to talk yourself into feeling really good about the number 14 pick, there's a lot of games here where he hit big outside shots, which is the knock on him really coming in, and highlighted by his ability to drive to the basket, which was really the consistent part of his game over the course of the season where he really excelled.
And it's worth noting, yeah, there were some bad moments. Some of the times when he settled for long threes at the end of games, those weren't good. The no-show against Purdue where he really played poorly, that wasn't good. He had some other performances that weren't good. Yes, no question about it. But how many freshmen had this many big shots, especially in games that, in moments that led to their team winning? And that's why I wanted to do this segment, because it's easy to focus on the negatives and the things that didn't go right, and goodness knows there were a lot of them. Just go back and listen to the post-game shows, and there were many times when we came on here and were frustrated with Romeo. But, when you get away from it and, analyzing every single game and every single moment, and you can step back and you just start adding up all the big moments, I mean, how many freshmen do that? How many freshmen have we seen that you could put a list like this together? Not many, and that's what I think is so impressive about this, and why. And I think Romeo's year at Indiana is going to age really well. Obviously, if he goes on and has a great NBA career, that will, help that happen. But I just think if people really take a good look at it and put it in the proper context and remember some of these big moments, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about, what can you do? What big plays can you make? And he did it time after time. So focus on the negatives if you want to, but for a freshman to be able to come in to major college basketball and make this many big plays, still is really, really impressive. And that leads us to play number one. And I don't think there was really anywhere else that we can go. The game winner against Wisconsin to win that game in double overtime, 73-73, 10 seconds to go. Romeo brings it up. He attacks right, scores. And, in the moment, and I think you guys will agree with it, there was not a doubt that was going in. And I think the context of that play is important because, it came on the heels, I think maybe against Iowa. At Iowa, he settled for a long shot against Michigan State. You had these moments where it's at the end of regulation or overtime. Is Romeo going to settle for a long shot? Is he actually going to drive in? When he drove, good things usually happen. And so I think we were all excited. You're thinking, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? Please, Romeo, drive. And he does, and he makes it. He does what he does best. And, Indiana hasn't beaten Wisconsin a ton lately, and so I don't think we're at the point where we can take wins over Wisconsin for granted. And him ending that double OT game with the game winner, it's got to be his number one moment.
Yeah, I think that's a fair one. The Michigan State game was big, but I feel like after the way IU's played against Wisconsin so much over these past few years, that one maybe from a fan perspective was a little bit extra special. And that was really during the part of the season where there was that resurgence and trying to really build back up a resume and get back in the NCAA tournament picture. That was such a big game for a variety of reasons where everybody was running on fumes at the end of that game, but they kept going to him and delivered at a big moment to close out the win.
Andy, that's a great point too, because the first 2 years haven't necessarily gone the way fans want Indiana basketball to go. And last year's was really crazy with the long losing streaks. And the Michigan State game was right in the middle of all that. The Wisconsin game kept the season alive. And Romeo just coming to Indiana is going to be a benefit. Romeo being selected 14th on Thursday night is going to be a benefit. The candy stripe, all of that stuff is going to be a benefit to Indiana. But these that game winner against Wisconsin set Indiana forward for some wins that got people back into, okay, maybe we can do something. And it obviously didn't work out. And there's some negatives, and we've talked about that. But Romeo will have left a legacy, and hopefully it's a positive legacy that a few years down the road we can really look back and celebrate his time here at Indiana more than just these 10 plays.
Absolutely. Well said, Coach. All right, coming up in our third segment, we're going to answer your questions, which include one about who we expect to make the biggest jump in production next season, plus whatever else we have time for in our final segment coming up. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. 42:33, so we've got about 7 minutes for this segment. So we'll hit the biggest jump in production question, which, Andy, we kind of talked about last week, but we can get Coach's thoughts on it. And then, Mark asked if Romeo is taken lower than expected with this impact recruiting. Did we cover that on the show, or was that was in the in-between stuff?
Will this be on the podcast?
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out.
We've kind of
hit that, right?
And it was kind of hypothetical too, so I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So let's ignore that. Let's see. JD asked, "What are your top 3 draft picks from other Big Ten teams to add to IU's roster?" Do you have quick thoughts on that you want to hit that? I'd have to go look. I think
I was trying to kind of look up. I was kind of trying to go look up some things.
By the way, I love this tweet from a friend of the show, Sam Story. He put in quotes, "I heard Romeo didn't like his time at IU." And he says, "I always laughed at the people who just made up rumors to feel like they knew what they were talking about. For the record, he loved, keyword loved, all caps, his coaches and loved the IU experience in his lone season. Best of luck."
Well, that Sally in the chat room said that she said once, I'm not finding it now, but he was, here it is. If any other kids pay tribute to their colleges the way Romeo did, I didn't hear it. When they interviewed him, I wonder what was said. And she goes on to say that makes me so happy because that shows that he did enjoy his time. So
I don't know. Jen texted me that the interview was lame compared to the others. They basically asked him one question and then let him go. I don't know what he said, and I don't know what the question was, but.
And maybe that's just the candy stripe too, or something. I don't know. I don't know what was said, but again, it goes back to the whole story was he wasn't happy. He wasn't happy with his teammates and all that kind of stuff. And that's just proven to be, Sally says she meant the candy stripes.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So
Celtics now taking Grant Williams to go with him from Tennessee.
Hey, that's a good pick. Grant Williams is a good player.
They took that, but they might be trading a Thibault guy from Washington. But
I think they traded that one. One of the picks they got for it is the one they're using on Grant Williams.
Okay.
Because the NBA apparently cannot possibly just let them announce the trades and then put on this charade where put on this hat and then you can't keep track of anything while you're trying to figure out who's actually going where because they don't announce it and then they pretend that different things are going on.
Can't they have an approval process that's a lot quicker? I mean, it's draft night. Have them send it into the NBA office and approve it right away. And that just looks ridiculous when a kid's wearing a
and they're interviewing them like they're going to someplace. It's just silly. I don't know about that. I mean, I kind of glanced through rosters. I found one of Alex's updates on whatever, but I don't know that I have great ideas.
I would take Wieskamp from Iowa, stick him on this team right now. A wing that can make shots. Give me Wieskamp.
I would take Jordan Bohannon, a healthy Jordan Bohannon, 1, because he can make shots, and 2, because you don't have to play against him.
You just stick him on the bench.
Yeah.
Put him on the bench behind Rob and Devontae.
It's fine if he can play. It's just, but then you're not having to play against him.
That's right. Okay, let's hit that question because those are good answers. I guess the obvious answer is Cassius Winston, but that's no fun.
Yeah, not really. I was trying to look at other really good wing shooters in there.
Wieskamp. I guess Maryland has a couple guys, right?
Yeah, Kalsher from Minnesota is decent, but
he made enough shots against us.
Yeah, he's a wing guy. Yeah, I'm just basically protecting IU from guys who have burned them in the past. I would also like to take C.J. Jackson and Barrett Southern.
Yeah. Oh,
I
man.
don't even give a shit if these guys play. I just want them to not play against IU. That doesn't even matter. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so let's hit that because that's funny. That is funny. Okay, so are you guys going to go to that Crimson Cast bar crawl on August 3rd? I can't. If I could drive in, I would, but I'm not going to be able to fly in for it.
As of now, I am planning to, but
I think I'm
a lot can change in the next month and a half. But
I mentioned that to the missus that I probably will be going on August 3rd.
Okay. Nice. I think maybe we'll use some AC funds to buy a round of drinks because Crimson Cast paved the way. So maybe we can buy a round of drinks for everybody or something.
Yeah.
Andy and I could
show some respect to the Godfathers.
Tape a segment as we go.
That'd be cool. I think Galen said they may try and do a live recording. So if they can, that'd be awesome. Hop on there. We can run it on our podcast too. Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Right. Okay, good. I'm glad someone's going to be able to go.
Yeah, I'm hoping to be able to go. At this point, I'm planning on it, but I haven't booked a hotel room or anything like that yet. But
and I might be recovered from the 3-day party of the wedding by then to actually enjoy myself again.
Hang on, I gotta reply to someone on Twitter real quick. Who said Jason Kennedy just sent me a tweet from Bill Simmons that said he hates the Celtics draft. Hates it. Let's see. What was it that Ryan said once about Bill Simmons?
Oh,
Do I have this handy? I don't know if I have this drop handy. Well, I mean, I know what it was. It was 90% of his basketball opinions are moronic. He was talking about Bill Simmons when he said that.
Nice.
So
it's funny. There were people saying because they ended up trading back, and then I think I don't know if they were thinking that they would lose, or I think somebody said they thought they could still get Brandon Clark if they tried to drop back, but they could not.
90% of his basketball opinions are moronic.
Yeah. Okay. 90% of his basketball. I'm tweeting that.
Oh boy.
Okay. Hey man, this is a celebratory night. I'm excited. Now I just hope Juwan goes. I mean, I don't think he's going to get drafted, but I look forward to seeing him.
But hopefully he can get into
a chance.
Good situation that gives him an opportunity at least.
Yeah. All right, let's do this. Joel says Simmons is looking for clicks. I'm not a huge fan of his, but The Ringer is a really good site. I give him credit for that. I do give him credit for that. Okay. He does some good podcast interviews too. Sometimes. All right, let's do this. You gents, we got about 7 minutes. All right, here we go.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open three, and I never miss an episode of The Assembly Call.
Thank you, Nick. Welcome back to The Assembly Call. I am Jerod Morris, here with Andy Bottoms and the coach Brian Tonsoni. Remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason. And after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. Quick note on the newsletter, we're taking a 2-week hiatus, so you will not get a Six-Banner Sunday this week or the next week, but then they will resume weekly after that. All right, it is time now for our mailbag. All questions submitted in our private IU basketball discussion community, assemblycall.com/community. Guys, let's see if we can hit a couple of these here real quick. JD wants to know, which player on IU's roster do you expect to see the biggest jump in performance from next year? He said, define that however you want. Andy, you and I touched on this last week in our conversation with Galen, so we can kind of refer people back to that. I went pretty strong with Rob Finney that I think he's going to have a huge jump in production in terms of points and assists. I'm really, I think his impact and consistency are really going to be there. Who do you think has the biggest jump? And then, Coach, we'll get your fresh thoughts on who has the biggest jump in production.
I brought up Demizi based on some of the things that former players have said about him. also somewhat easy to predict a large jump in production from the level that he produced at last year. But I think opportunity wise, he's got an opportunity if he can make shots to carve out a spot on the team and a role and really be in the rotation this year in a way that he wasn't able to a year ago. I think Devontae is the other one that's somewhat obvious just out of necessity, potentially more than anything, just to really jump his production and produce in a way more like what he did down the stretch.
And obviously Jerome Hunter, if he plays, I mean, anything he produces is going to be a big jump over nothing. So we'll wait and see there. Coach, your thoughts?
You can go down 1 through 11 and find hope that players are going to bounce and make huge strides. But I think the real key is at the 4 spot. Race Thompson, what's he going to do after 2 years, and can he stay injury free? And it might not be points per game, but defending and rebounding and filling some of that role at the 4. And then Indiana's really going to be good if Justin Smith breaks out.
Yep.
I'm not predicting that, but with his athleticism and his experience, can he be that responsibility of production guy that Jawan was given when Archie came in? Can he handle that responsibility of being more productive? Can he play at a high level? Can his motor be more consistent? If he does, then I think the program is going to be in good shape.
Yep, well said. All right, next question. This is kind of a fun one. What are your top 3 picks, maybe 2 if you want to fill out the scholarships evenly, from other Big Ten teams to add to IU's roster for next year? Need to be on another Big Ten roster for next year to be eligible. So, the obvious, I think everybody in the Big Ten would take Cassius Winston. So that's an easy one. But I think we have, maybe more fun and creative answers than that. My first instinct is a wing shooter, and the first guy that popped into my head was Joe Wieskamp. Maybe there's a better one out there, but off the top of my head, that's the first one who came to mind. Give me a guy who can make 40% from 3 and play on the wing. I'll be happy. Andy, what do you think?
I mean, I think everybody's head immediately goes to shooting. My answer was Jordan Bohannon for 2 reasons. 1, because he can shoot, and 2, because he would not be shooting against you at that point. So I might just use one of the picks and just use it on him and be done from there. I think a couple of the guys from Maryland on the wing, Ayala and what was the other guy's name? I just looked
Wiggins.
That could really shoot the ball from a wing perspective. Gabe Kalsher was another one that shot it really well against IU at least. And even a athletic wing defender like an Aaron Henry, somebody like that. But yeah, my first instinct was Bohannon, both as a way to help the shooting and as a preventative measure.
Coach, what about you?
I love the preventative measure, and so I'm going to go that way because I just think that's excellent.
Cassius Winston and Jordan Bohannon. You just sit on the bench, and we don't have to play you.
Did Stevens stay in the draft, or is he coming back to?
No, Stevens is back. Okay,
I don't ever want to see him play against Indiana again. I mean, the kid's good. Kudos to you, but Lamar. But no, I don't want you playing against Indiana. So there's that preventative one there, and then the Davis did guard at Wisconsin, who flops all the time and falls down and acts that way. So those 2 maybe you'd love to have on your team for that toughness and that grit that they show and that confidence, popping the collar stuff that they do. But popping the collar, just help Indiana get a few more wins if they don't play against the Hoosiers.
So let's see here. So let's hit Bill's question real quick. He wants to know, what sort of in-state tournament achievements do you believe Archie needs to orchestrate before top 25 recruits from outside the state will seriously consider an offer from IU basketball on a regular basis? We've seen Archie recruit, the big names from in-state. What do you guys think? Like, where does that need to get to? Just making the tournament? Do you have to make the second round of the second weekend of the tournament? We got about a minute left. Andy, you go first. What do you think needs to happen for Indiana to get back to recruiting on a national level?
I don't know. It's such a hard question to answer. I think just repeated getting into the tournament on a regular basis and, at least multiple, some Sweet 16s with maybe an Elite 8 or a Final 4 mixed in there. I just think if you want to get kids to come in and really pitch the idea of, hey, you can be a part of something that's going to, get your way to the NCAA tournament, I think you've got to be much better, much more consistent at getting there. And then at some point you got to build on that to actually get deep with some regularity. I don't know if there's a specific number of a given level of the tournament to get to.
What do you think, Coach? What needs to happen?
Yeah, I think Archie they need to start making tournaments regularly. Archie's already gotten some top kids late that he didn't start off with coming in. Quinones, Close, the guy that ended up at North Carolina that was at Virginia Tech. Give him credit. He's working it, and the tourney appearances will help.
Yep. That's it. We're done. No more questions.
All righty, that is going to do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. That went fast. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We'll be back again to talk with you next Thursday night. Until then,
take it from me, Jordan Halls. Keep your elbow in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Okay. Good stuff. Now maybe Romeo will get on Cameo and we can pay him some money to get a promo.
Hey, that's a way to raise money for Assembly Call. Assembly Call / Cameo for birthday wishes. Charge $3, $4, $5. We could go on, record something, have our own drops, send it to them. They could send their grandkids a little Jerod. They could ask, no one would ask for Ryan, so it'd just be the three of us.
Come on, dude.
Oh man. We could undercut everybody on price. We'll be in there for like $3, $4.
Yeah, exactly.
You want a nice cheap Cameo? We'll sit there and record stuff all day long.
Quick anniversary gift for your wife, Coach Tonsoni. Hello, this is Coach Tonsoni from Assembly Call. I know it's your 20th anniversary and you want some, bigger gifts, but you get me instead. Get some candy stripe negligee and make Robert happy. Dude, that might be $10 right there.
This is the best AC After Dark we've had in a long time. This is inspired.
It was $30. I'll drive anywhere in Indiana, knock on the door, and bring a singing candygram. Personal drive-up message.
Oh my
God.
Jerod, you'll be
mattress
excited.
Place that went door to door to build the mattress. I'll just drive up, knock on the door, say some Assembly Call thing for $30 and send it to the show.
Oh my God.
The Celtics also appear to have picked Ty Jerome, Jerod. So you can.
Oh my God. I'm a Celtics fan.
All in.
All right. That's it. That is it. I'm getting a Celtics jersey. No, wait. I thought it said Phoenix. Boston's trading number 24 to the Suns, who are focused on taking Ty Jerome.
Oh, well, never mind. Sorry.
Oh, man, he's going to the Suns? Oh, well. Oh, well. Okay. So, Andy, you're hosting next week, correct? Because I am out of town. Hopefully, Ryan will be back. He's got some heavy lifting to do.
True.
He hasn't been here in like a month. Coach, are you good for next week?
No. Here's another drop.
He's already getting everyone for the services.
I have a certain medical test Friday morning, which necessitates a lot of preparation on Thursday night. So I don't know if I could consistently be on the show without, like having to run to a certain room in the house every 5 minutes. So while I will be available, I'm going to be medically on the disabled list, I think, Thursday. Sorry.
Okay. So it'll be
sorry, Jen, but
it'll be Andy and Ryan. We'll see who else we might want to bring on. Maybe we'll bring on a third person. Yeah, we can figure it out. Yeah, I'm going to be. I don't know what my Wi-Fi situation is going to be like, so just do it like normal, and I'll post it afterwards at night. But
okay.
Cool. Well, thanks, gents.
Hopefully something will happen. I mean, nothing bad, of course, but hopefully there'll be something to talk about. It's getting a little.
Well, yeah, I know. I know. We need someone to commit so Ryan can do his patented scouting reports.
There you go.
Look at the tape, and Brian Toohey says Doc Phillips pay. He no longer gets benefits. That's for sure. He fell off the benefits plan. That is for sure. All right, guys.
All right.
Thanks for being
All right,
here. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Talk to you next week. Congrats, Romeo.
Thanks. Have a good night.